So in the last episode, you saw me lay up a bunch of glass. Well, I guess you didn't actually see me lay it all up, but I laid up a ton of glass. And everything cured. I've gone back and sanded everything down with some 80 grit paper. And now it's time to start looking at fairing in the surface, filling in all the little dimples and low spots and pits and that kind of thing. And to do that, I'm going to be using some thickened epoxy. Now, the epoxy that I prefer to use is West System, and I'm going to be using their 410 filler. Now, before we can do that, the first thing we need to do is to actually go over the whole boat and wipe it down with some acetone and clean the surface so that we get a good bond. And there's really nothing special about the way that you do this. I'm making sure I'm wearing some rubber gloves, and the shop that I'm in, it's a large enough area that I'm not concerned at all about any of the vapors or fumes. I've got the big doors open and a good draft going through, so that's why I'm not wearing my respirator. But when you're wiping this down, go ahead and make sure that you're, regularly flipping the rags and changing them out so that you're not wiping, trying to clean a surface with a dirty rag. So now that everything's clean, I've gone ahead and mixed up my epoxy. Now I mixed it up to a little bit thicker than, than peanut butter consistency. And here you can see I'm basically using a trowel to apply it and kind of smooth it out the best I can. And very similar to doing drywall mudding, I guess. And I went over the boat twice. And the first time I went over it, I used, I believe it's a little 6-inch trowel. And then the second time that I went over it with another coat of epoxy, I used a 9-inch trowel. And the reason for doing that was the 9-inch just kind of spanned a wider distance. And when you're trying to fair in a surface, you want to make any kind of transitions in the hull as smooth as possible. And the wider that you can make that transition happen, the more natural and the better it's going to look. Well, I think we all kind of have a pretty good idea as far as what's coming next. I mean, you lay up all this epoxy, you're going to have to sand it all back off, or at least, sand it back down. And to do this, the first thing I'm doing is I'm on the large, I guess, flatter areas. I'm using a longboard, and the reason, again, same principle as when I used the wider trowel for laying this up. I'm using a longboard here to smooth out, and if there's any dimples, high spots, low spots, I want to be able to see that. If I were to use a little random orbit sander, that would have a tendency to kind of follow the contours that are kind of in the original layup on the glass, and that's what I'm looking to eliminate. I want to eliminate the irregularities, and I want it to just make it look like a nice, perfectly curved surface. Finally, time to start having a little bit of fun here. Now, the first thing I'm going to be doing or spraying on here is going to be a primer coat, and I'm actually going to be going over the boat twice. First coat that I spray on is going to be light, a tack coat, and then the second coat that I spray on is going to be probably twice as heavy, giving me a better film thickness. Now, before I can do this, I've already gone through and wiped the whole boat down with acetone and also went over it with a degreaser so that the surface is clean and we get a good bond. So here I'm starting the second coat of the primer, and as you can see when I'm spraying this, it's going on much heavier. It's completely wetting the surface out, and it's giving me a good uniform color. I'm not getting any kind of a bleed through from anything that's underneath it. Now, it's kind of a fine line that you walk when you're spraying, because you want to get it on heavy enough that you get a good film thickness, but you don't want to lay it on too heavy that you start to get some drips or runs. And now with the primer coat completely cured, now it's time to start coming back and addressing some of the pinholes. Now, pinholes can crop up for a couple different reasons. I mean, it could have been something that you missed when you're prepping the surface before you even shot the primer, or it could have been something that was created as the primer itself was curing and gassing off. Well, whatever the reason, you need to go over the whole boat with, I guess, a fine-tooth comb and a microscope and get every single pinhole. Or at least every single one that you can find. Any pinhole that's left is going to be visible once you actually shoot the paint coat or the top coat on. And if you're looking for a top-notch job, that's not something you want to see. And the glazing putty that I use for filling all the pinholes, it's a fast cure product. And what that means is basically after you lay it up, you've got 10-15 more minutes and it's ready to start sanding. And there's an awful lot of sanding to be done. Now, getting rid of these pinholes, it's a process. I mean, it's not something that you're going to go over the boat once with some putty, sand it down, and you're done. More oftentimes than not, you go over it, you lay it up, you sand it down, and you find more. And you lay it up, you sand it down, and you keep repeating that process until everything looks good. And at that point, then you've got to go over and seal all this glazing putty in and basically resurface the boat and get it ready for painting. So after that, the pinhole process is finished. Shoot another coat or two of primer and let that fully cure. Oh yeah. Sorry about that. I'm not quite sure what happened. But anyways, there's sanding, and there's more sanding, and there's a lot more sanding. But then finally, there's more spraying. Now remember when I said this was going to be a floating version of a 57 Chevy? Well, yeah, buddy, here comes the color. This is tropical turquoise, and the painting system, or the color system that we're going to be using, is made by PPG. Now, just like most painting systems, you're not going to get full coverage off of one coat. So we're going to go around this boat 2, possibly 3 times to get a good, solid, uniform color. And then we're going to be doing a clear coating. Now, the clear coat that we're going to use is, again, by PPG, but it's from their concept line. Whereas the base coat, or the color that I'm shooting here, is from their DBC, or David Boy Charlie line. So I'm going to continue running around the boat and spraying this base color down until I get good uniform coverage and consistent color, and really I'm more or less happy with how everything looks. Now, after that's all set, I'm going to let it sit and dry for a little bit. There is a time window that you work with this PPG system, but then I'll start taping off and spraying the accents on the fins.